It was 2 a.m. when the pounding came. 3 sharp knocks, too heavy for the thin motel door. I froze with the spoon halfway to my mouth, cold chicken noodle soup dripping back into the can. No one visited me at this hour. No one visited me at all. Room 46 of the Valley View Motel was where people went to disappear, not to be found. "Mr. Whitman," a voice called. "Calm, precise. Harold Whitman." My chest tightened. The last time anyone said my name with authority, it was a judge stripping me of custody, declaring I wasn't fit to raise my own kids. For a second, I thought maybe it was the sheriff come to tell me rent was overdue again. I set the can down on the wobbly nightstand and stood. The heater clanged like it was coughing itself to death. The carpet was stained with 1,000 lives before mine. I tightened the robe around me more out of shame than warmth and opened the door. He was nothing like I expected. Tall silver hair, slicked back black overcoat, draped like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama. The kind of man who had polished shoes even at midnight. His suit had to be worth more than everything I owned now. He carried a leather case in one hand and an expression that said he knew more about me than I did. "Mr. Whitman," he said again, this time softer, but it hit me like a gavel. "Yeah," I rasped. "That's me. If this is about money, I don't have any." He gave a half smile, almost pitying. "I'm not here for money. I'm here with the truth. May I come in, the truth?" I almost laughed. The truth had taken everything from me already. The truth was a wife who'd sworn she loved me, then turned her back when I'd sold the last of my tools. The truth was watching Evelyn walk into court with another man, her lawyer, her savior, her lover, and walk out with my children while I was left with nothing but debt and disgrace. But something in his eyes kept me from slamming the door, steady, unwavering like a man used to being believed. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. Then you're gone." He entered as if the room offended him, placed the leather case on the unmade bed, and turned to face me. "My name is Edward Blackwell. I'm a private investigator. And what I have here," he tapped, "the case will change everything you thought you knew about Evelyn Whitman, her so-called illness, and why she really left you." The motel hum faded. My ears rang like I'd stepped too close to a blast. For 6 months, I'd lived with one truth that I failed. My wife failed, my children failed, as a man. If this stranger was telling me there was another truth, I wasn't sure I could take it. But I leaned closer anyway. Because when you've already lost everything, what's left to fear? Edward's words hung in the air like smoke. But instead of answering him, my mind drifted backward. It always did whenever someone said Evelyn's name. Before the motel. Before the soup cans and overdue rent. Before betrayal tasted like rust in my mouth. I had a life most men would envy. I can still see the sign that once hung over Main Street in Wichita Whitman & Sons construction. Bold red letters my father painted himself, the kind that made you proud just driving past. Business was good. Families trusted me to build the homes they'd raise their children in. I never cut corners, not once. My foreman used to joke I measured twice and prayed once before every nail. We weren't rich, but there was always work, always respect. And then there was the house. My house. A 2-story colonial I built with my own hands on a quiet cul-de-sac. White siding, blue shutters, a porch swing. Evelyn loved to sit on in the evenings while the kids played in the yard. Every beam, every nail, every shingle, my sweat was in those walls. When I pulled into the driveway after a long day, I felt like a king returning to his castle. Michael would be the first to run out, helmet under his arm, begging me to throw a football until the sun disappeared. At 15, he had my broad shoulders, but his mother's smile. Grace followed with her violin case, shy but determined. She had a gift, no doubt about it, At 13, she was already first chair in the school orchestra. I promised her I'd never miss a performance. And Evelyn? God, Evelyn, high school sweetheart. The girl I'd walked across the football field with on homecoming night. The woman I swore I'd grow old with. We'd married young, too young, some said, but it never mattered. She had a laugh that could fill a room, and back then it was always mine. I thought it always would be. Life was full, noisy, blessed. Sunday mornings we sat in the second pew at St. Luke's Chapel. Pastor Raymond's booming voice carrying the hymns higher than the rafters. He'd clasp my hand after service and say, "Harold, you're a man who builds more than houses. You're building legacy." Evelyn would blush and squeeze my arm, proud of what we had, of what we were. Neighbors waved when we mowed the lawn. Friends came by with casseroles after long work weeks. We were part of something solid, something American, in the truest sense. Community, faith, family. That's what makes the silence now so deafening. To go from the sound of hammers, footballs, thudding against leather violin strings echoing down the hall to the drone of a motel air conditioner that barely works. How does a man not lose his mind? I close my eyes, gripping the memory like a lifeline, because in those days I still believed love was forever, that sacrifice was noble, that family meant safe ground. I had no idea that behind Evelyn's smile was a storm already gathering. But memories have sharp edges. They cut deepest when you least expect it. I can still feel the day the laughter in our house cracked and never sounded the same again. It was an ordinary Tuesday when Evelyn called me at work, her voice fractured, sobbing so hard I could barely make out the words. "Harold, I'm at the hospital. They found something. Please come." I dropped my hammer, left my crew staring, and drove through every red light between the job site and St. Joseph's Medical. The hallway smelled like bleach and fear. When I pushed open the door there, she was pale in a paper gown mascara, streaked like war paint down her cheeks. Beside her stood Dr. Leonard Graves, tall, neatly pressed coat clipboard in hand, like a verdict waiting to be read. "Mr. Whitman." He began his tone, a surgeon's blend of calm and gravity. "Your wife has stage 3 ovarian cancer. It's aggressive. We need to begin treatment immediately." Those words, stage 3, they don't just land. They hollow you out. I sat hard in the plastic chair, my world tilting, while Evelyn reached for my hand with trembling fingers. She whispered, "I don't want to die, Harold. I want to see Michael graduate, hear Grace play her violin at Carnegie Hall. I want to grow old with you. And I fool husband believer swore right there. You won't die, Evelyn. I'll sell every tool, every brick, every piece of myself if that's what it takes. I'll keep you here." That vow became my religion. Within weeks, my Chevy truck was gone, sold for half its worth. The backhoe I'd saved years to buy sold. The Harley my father had handed down to me, chrome gleaming with his pride, gone. Each sale felt like carving flesh off bone, but I did it smiling because it meant she might live. Neighbors whispered about my sacrifices. At the grocery store, people patted my shoulder, eyes wet with pity. At church, Pastor Raymond prayed over Evelyn, while I knelt head bowed, feeling both small and strong at once. But not everyone believed the picture. One evening, as I carried Evelyn's prescriptions up the porch steps, our elderly neighbor Sally Green called across the fence. "Harold," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "I don't like how she won't let anyone sit with her during treatments. My sister fought ovarian cancer. I was by her side every visit. Something doesn't smell right." I forced a smile I didn't feel. "She's private, Sally. Doesn't want to be seen sick." Sally's eyes narrowed, but she let it go. I didn't. I shoved the doubt so deep inside it almost strangled me. Back then I thought sacrifice proved love. I thought giving up everything would bind us tighter. But every time I handed over another piece of my life keys, titles, heirlooms, Evelyn's eyes seemed less grateful, more calculating. I should have seen it. God help me, I should have seen it. The vow I made in that hospital room became the noose tightening around my life. Every sacrifice bled me dry, and still the bills arrived like soldiers marching to war. I told myself love demanded it, that a man's worth was measured by what he could give up for his family. But I didn't see then how much it would take until there was nothing left. First went the company. Whitman & Sons Construction. The name painted proudly by my father collapsed like a house with rotted beams. Clients backed away when I missed deadlines, when I sold the very machines I needed to finish their projects. One by one, my crew scattered to other jobs. Men I'd stood beside for years, men who'd carried my kids on their shoulders at 4th of July picnics, left with handshakes that felt like funerals. Then went the house. The 2-story colonial I'd built, nail by nail, the one with blue shutters Evelyn once painted on a spring afternoon, sold to strangers. I still see the for sale sign hammered into the lawn like a gravestone. When the buyers walked through, admiring the hardwood floors and the porch swing, I stood in the kitchen, clutching the counter, forcing myself not to beg them to leave it be. Within weeks, Michael and Grace were boxing up their bedrooms, their trophies and sheet music crammed into brown cartons. Grace cried the first night we moved into the cramped rental downtown, but she muffled it with her pillow so I wouldn't hear. I heard anyway. Through it all, Evelyn seemed weaker by the day, thinner, paler, wrapped in blankets, even in the Kansas summer heat. But little details unsettled me. The faint trace of Chanel perfume she hadn't worn in years suddenly clung to her clothes. Late-night texts lit up her phone, and she'd slip out onto the balcony whispering words I couldn't catch. When I asked, she brushed it off. Support group friends, she said. You wouldn't understand Harold. I told myself the scent, the secrecy, the distance were side effects of treatment. That the woman I loved was still there, just hidden behind chemo and fear. I believed because I needed to. Because admitting otherwise meant acknowledging a crack in the foundation I'd destroyed myself to preserve. But the crack widened. Michael, once inseparable from me, started spending more time with his mother, absorbing her bitterness like rain into dry soil. Grace stopped asking me to attend her rehearsals. She'd look at Evelyn first before meeting my eyes. It was subtle at first, the way they pulled away like the tide inching back from shore, but I felt the cold emptiness it left behind. I told myself we were still a family, that we were weathering a storm together. But deep down I knew storms don't last a year without tearing roofs off houses. And the truth was ours was already gone. I just didn't know the worst part yet, that sometimes the one you're saving is already planning your downfall. I should have known the storm wasn't just passing over, it was circling, waiting to strike. Evelyn's weakness didn't last. Almost overnight, she began to recover. The pallor faded, her hair grew thick again. Her eyes no longer dim, but sharp, watchful. While I was still counting pennies to pay the rent, she was suddenly radiant, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. One evening, I came home from a day of hauling drywall for cash under the table and found her packing suitcases on the bed. My chest tightened. Evelyn, what are you doing? She didn't look up, folding blouses with crisp precision. I'm leaving you, Harold. At first I laughed, numb, disbelieving. Leaving. We just survived the worst year of our lives. We beat cancer for God's sake. She turned then, and the look in her eyes chilled me more than the diagnosis ever had. Don't fool yourself. You lost everything, Harold. A real man would have found a way to keep his business, his house, his dignity. You sold it all like a desperate child pawning toys. I don't want a broken man. I want a real one. The words hit harder than any hammer I'd ever swung. I stammered, I gave up everything to save you. And that's exactly the problem, she sneered. Weak men give, strong men keep. You'll never understand that. It wasn't long before I saw who she thought the real man was. At the courthouse, she arrived in designer clothes I couldn't have afforded in my best days, walking arm in arm with Victor Malone, a high-powered divorce lawyer with a Rolex that caught the light like a dagger. He was more than her attorney. I saw it in the way he placed his hand at the small of her back, the way she leaned into him with ease. My stomach turned. Court was hell. Evelyn painted me as unstable, reckless, too proud to accept help, but too weak to provide. She told the judge I'd gambled our future away, sold the house without consulting her, dragged the children through chaos. Her tears fell on cue, perfectly timed for maximum effect. When my turn came, I tried to explain, Your Honor, I sold everything to pay for Evelyn's treatment. The bills were crushing, but I did it for her, for our family. Victor cut in, voice smooth as silk. Or was it for his pride? Your Honor, my client's so-called illness never required the extravagant measures he chose. Mr. Whitman destroyed his family with his own reckless decisions. He's unfit financially and emotionally to raise 2 children. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes when the judge asked where he wanted to live. Grace sobbed, but nodded toward her mother. The gavel came down like a coffin lid. Full custody to Evelyn. I was granted supervised visits twice a month. As I walked out of that courthouse, my children's voices still echoing behind me, Evelyn brushed past close enough for me to smell that same expensive perfume. She leaned in just enough for me to hear. You lost Harold, and you'll keep losing because you're not the man I need. Her words seared like acid, and yet I had no idea the worst betrayal was still hidden, waiting to be uncovered. After the courthouse, I thought I had reached the bottom. I was wrong. The bottom has no floor. It keeps dropping until you stop fighting. For weeks I stayed in that rented room, the silence louder than any verdict. I believed Evelyn had won. That she had taken everything, my name, my children, my dignity. Then came that night at the motel. Edward Blackwell's words still echo in me. What I have here will change everything you thought you knew about Evelyn. I remember sitting across from him, the flickering neon light painting shadows on the peeling wallpaper, my hands shaking as he opened the leather case. The first thing he slid across the bed was a photograph. Evelyn smiling at a summer barbecue, holding a glass of wine. Beside her stood Dr. Leonard Graves. The date stamped at the bottom froze my blood 3 years before her diagnosis. I whispered, "That's impossible." She didn't even know him back then. Edward's voice was steady. Dr. Graves isn't just her oncologist. He's her cousin. And together they staged everything. The word hung there, staged. My mind replayed the nights I'd held Evelyn's trembling body, the way her hair fell out, the vomiting, the fear. No, I muttered. I saw it. She was sick. Edward pulled out medical reports, saline bags, diet pills, anti-anxiety meds, enough to mimic side effects, enough to convince even a husband who'd give his soul to believe. My throat went dry. I forced out the question. Where did the money go? He slid over a bank statement. Cayman National Bank. Another from Nassau. Hundreds of thousands, every dollar I sold, pawned, or borrowed wired into accounts under Evelyn's name. My father's Harley, my wedding ring, the house, my life, all of it salted away in paradise while I rotted in motels. I thought my knees would give out. I pressed my palms against my face, whispering, God, my kids, what will they think of me? Edward leaned forward. They're starting to know the truth. 2 months ago, Grace called your father from her mother's house. She found Evelyn shredding documents, hiding phone records. Grace didn't understand, but she knew it was wrong. That call was the reason your father hired me. For the first time in months, my heart lurched, not with despair, but something sharper hope. My daughter, my sweet violinist, had lit the first match in this darkness. That's when the door opened, and Edward wasn't alone. A woman stepped in, short auburn hair, navy blazer badge clipped to her belt. "Agent Lisa Monroe, FBI," she said. Her tone left no room for doubt. She carried a folder thick with evidence. "Mr. Whitman," she said, meeting my eyes. "Tomorrow morning we execute the warrant. Evelyn Whitman. Victor Malone and Dr. Leonard Graves will be arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and financial crimes. Your children are already safe with your parents." I stared at her, unable to breathe. Arrested. Safe. Words I'd stopped believing belonged to me. But Agent Monroe wasn't finished. She placed her hand on the file. "Mr. Whitman, your fight isn't over. It's just beginning." Agent Monroe's words still rang in my ears when Edward leaned back and gave me a look I hadn't seen in months, something close to relief. "You weren't alone, Harold," he said. "Not for a single day." At first I thought he meant himself or the FBI. But then the motel door opened again, and in walked a man whose presence filled the room more than any federal agent ever could. My father, Franklin Whitman, 78 years old. Former Marine, who still stood ramrod straight despite the weight of years. His hands were knotted with arthritis, but his grip was iron when he clasped my shoulder. "Son," he said simply. His voice carried every mile I'd fallen, every wall I'd hit. I choked. "Dad, you knew." He nodded once. I never believed Evelyn. Not for a second. I saw what she was doing, the way she controlled access, the secrets. "I hired Edward months ago. We've been building the case ever since." Behind him came my mother, Margaret, her gray hair pulled back, eyes sharp as a hawk's. In her hand, she carried a worn notebook. "Every time Evelyn claimed she had chemo, I followed," she said. "I wrote down where she went, who she met. She wasn't in a hospital, Harold. She was in restaurant stores, hiding in plain sight." I swallowed hard, shame burning through me. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mom's eyes softened. "Because you wouldn't have listened. You were too far inside your own sacrifice. You had to see the truth when it was undeniable." And then came Thomas, my younger brother, grease still under his fingernails from the mechanic shop he ran. He dropped a stack of printed bank records onto the bed. I traced the transfers, Vern. Bahamas, Cayman Islands. Every dollar you sold, she funneled straight out of your reach. I gave it all to Agent Monroe. It's airtight. I sat there stunned, staring at the three of them, the family I'd pushed away, convinced I was alone, while they'd been fighting behind the curtain all along. Dad cleared his throat and pulled an envelope from his jacket. He handed me a folded deed. My eyes scanned the paper, and my heart stopped. It was the house. My house. The one I'd built with my own hands and lost to strangers. "You bought it?" My voice cracked. "We did," Dad said. "Through a trust. Evelyn thought it was gone, but it's been waiting for you. Your tools, your workshop, even that old porch swing, everything's just as you left it. You'll need it when this is over." I couldn't speak. My throat closed with a mix of grief, gratitude, and disbelief. Pastor Raymond appeared last, stepping in quietly, Bible under his arm. He put his hand on my shoulder. "Harold, God never left you. Neither did we. Evil only wins when good men stop fighting. And you, son, are not done fighting." The room spun, But this time not from despair, from the sudden overwhelming knowledge that I hadn't been abandoned. I had been surrounded, protected, loved. But even as tears blurred my vision, one thought struck me cold. If Evelyn realized how much we knew how close we were, she would do anything to escape. And that meant time was running out. Time was running out. Edward knew it. Agent Monroe knew it. And deep down, so did I. Evelyn had lived months ahead of me, planning, deceiving, always one step in front. But that night, for the first time, I felt like she was about to be caught. The following morning, I stood on my parents' porch as dawn broke over the Kansas fields. My heart hammered as two black SUVs pulled up to the house Evelyn now shared with Victor Malone. Within minutes, the FBI swarmed. I watched from the road, hands clenched, as Evelyn, dressed in silk hair perfect, was led out in handcuffs. She shouted my name, spitting venom, promising she'd ruin me, but for once her words bounced off like stones thrown at steel. Victor followed, shouting about lawyers, about rights. Behind them came Dr. Graves, sweat pouring down his face, the mask of a healer torn away to reveal a con man. I should have felt rage. Instead, what I felt was release, a weight lifted, leaving something raw but lighter in its place. That afternoon, Agent Monroe came to my parents' house with news I never dared hope for. "Your children have been told the truth," she said softly. "They're waiting for you." I stepped into the living room, and there they were. Michael, taller now, trying to be stoic, but his jaw trembled as he whispered, "Dad." Grace dropped her violin case and ran straight into my arms, sobbing. "I knew something was wrong, Dad. I knew." I held them both, tears soaking into their hair. For the first time in months, I breathed without pain. For the first time, I believed we might be whole again. A week later, I walked through the doorway of my old house. The shutters still blew, the porch swing still swaying in the Kansas wind. Inside the workshop was just as I'd left it, sawdust on the bench tools, lined neatly, as if waiting for my hands. My father's doing, my family's faith. It didn't take long before the old crew returned. Chester Miguel. Every man who had once built alongside me, showing up with coffee and calloused hands ready to work. "The town's been waiting," Harold Chester said. "They want Whitman Construction back." We started small, a shed, a deck, then a farmhouse restoration. But word spread. Clients came back. Slowly, brick by brick, my life rebuilt itself. One evening, Edward Blackwell stopped by. He placed a card on my workbench. "You've lived this nightmare, Harold. You can help others see the signs before it's too late. Join me. Investigate. Tell your story." I thought of the men and women who might be out there right now, selling their homes, pawning their rings for lies. And I knew my story wasn't just about survival. It was a warning. A mission. Today in my workshop, above the tools and timber, hangs a single key. The tarnished brass key to room 46 of the Valley View Motel. Not as a reminder of failure, but as proof. Proof that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation for rebuilding. Whenever I see it, I remember this truth. You can lose everything to betrayal, but with faith, with family, with fight, you can rise again. This story may have touched something deep in you, betrayal, hope, or the strength to rise again. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part spoke to you most? And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more powerful stories like this. Your voice keeps this community alive.